Starting development in 1992 and finally releasing in 1995 on the Super Nintendo, Squaresoft's Chrono Trigger was created by what eventually became known as the Dream Team. Original Final Fantasy series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi, Enix's Yuji Horii, creator of Dragon Quest, and Akira Toriyama, legendary anime artist known for his work on the Dragon Ball series, all teaming up together to create something that they felt had never been done before. Throw in famed Final Fantasy director Yoshinori Kitase, and this is basically the JRPG equivalent of the Expendables. Each member of the team was able to shake the trappings of their respective known works, and instead of being held back with the expectations of chocobos, slimes, or Dragon Balls, could fully explore their creative freedom. Introduce the always risky time travel concept, and you've either got an innovative masterpiece or a convoluted case of too many cooks in the kitchen. So which is it? Find out today with me as I retroactively review Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger opens, as so many 90s RPG games do, in a sleepy, peaceful village, this time in the kingdom of Guardia, hometown to silent protagonist and swordsman Chrono. It's the year 1000 AD and the kingdom is celebrating with its millennial fair. While taking part in the celebrations, Chrono runs into a girl with a mysterious past named Marl, and they agree to take part in an experiment conducted by friend and local inventor Luca. The three manage to seemingly tear a hole in the fabric of space-time, setting in motion a series of events that could alter the past and save or destroy the future.
What about all that talk about screwing up future events, the space-time continuum?
Well, I figured, what the hell?
While many games of the same era have spawned enormous franchises and continued to spurn out new iterations and reinventions, they run the risk of becoming stale if they don't change enough, or alienating fans if they change too much and become unfamiliar.
I know that you're hiding things.
Before we go on, by the way, full disclosure, I have never played Chrono Trigger before, so this isn't a game that I hold any nostalgia for, so this should be a pretty concise, clear-cut, unbiased review. Anyway, let's get on with it. Chrono Trigger can stand alone as a unique and never replicated experience. Nowhere is it more obvious that this game stood out among its peers than in the game's innovative battle system. Battles take place on the same top-down 2D environments as the game's regular exploration. There is no fade to black transition, hiding loading times, and no random encounters. Enemies are presented on screen and battle is initiated by the player entering the trigger zone of an on-screen enemy, and here is where the game shines most of all. The sprite art of the characters is consistent between both battles and exploration, with characters able to freely animate and move around on the battle screen as they would have done anywhere else. This was head and shoulders above other games at the time, who still had static characters that lined up on either side of the screen and simply shook when hit or attacking. Chrono and his friends run across the battle screen, visibly attacking the enemy before returning to formation or taking up a new position on the screen. Each character has more than one of their own unique attack animations, and every party member or enemy reacts differently to taking damage. Far from being just a display of visual prowess, however, Chrono Trigger has a deep and intricate battle system. Outside of your basic weapon attacks, each of your party members can also stand to learn abilities from the tech menu. Techs are characters' innate and unique abilities that only they have access to, and are unlocked through earning tech points, or TP, in battles. Chrono, for example, will learn more advanced sword skills like Wind Slash, which cuts all enemies that line up in a row, making clever use of the battle system not simply being a left party versus right party style encounter, but rather enemies line up in any endless amount of formations, so it's on the player to recognise patterns and to choose the best techs for the situation. Deepening the combat again is the fact that every character's tech ability can be combined with one or sometimes two other characters into a much more powerful dual or triple tech ability. As an example, Chrono's Cyclone Spin can be combined with Marl's Aura ability to heal all three party members instead of just one, or Frog and Chrono can combine their swords and attack in an X formation. The combinations for each character and the great animations for each of these techs will make you want to continuously switch party members to find the best playstyle for you. The game never lets you simply rest on your most powerful tech moves, however, as compositions of enemy encounters are rarely as simple as using one powerful move to clear the screen. Instead, the game will often pair enemies that are weak to magic with other enemies that counter or absorb magic, so if you aren't paying attention and simply try to spam your strongest magical abilities, you may end up wiping your own party out. A lot of RPG games suffer from mindless grinding, just spamming the attack button or using the auto battle feature to skip encounters, but combining enemy types that have opposite strengths and weaknesses is a good way to keep things interesting. Experience points to level your character's basic stats are also earned through coming out victorious in a battle, but the addition of tech points adds another layer to developing your ideal party, which stops things from ever becoming too stagnant. Each character's weapon and armour can be upgraded with shop purchases or exploration, and some weapons can even appear differently on the battle screen, changing colour or shape, which is very novel for the time. Throughout the journey, some of your party will gain mastery of elemental magics, which also grow more powerful over time with experience. Lightning, ice, water and fire all start as a single elemental attack and eventually level up to area of effect attacks capable of wiping out as many enemies as there are on screen. Much like the tech system, these spells can be combined with techs or other magic spells, creating a massive amount of well-appreciated variety. During exploration, if you leave one of the game's many settlements or dungeons, you can fully explore the Overworld map. This is maybe the only area in which the game kind of shows its age. Here you are limited to walking in 4 directions as opposed to the omnidirectional and fluid movement of the other area screens, and it can feel a little bit slow and clunky, especially when trying to line yourself up to the entry point of your next location or town. However, all of this can be easily forgiven due to the game's age and some of the other ways that the Overworld map is implemented with the time travel mechanic. Pretty early on in the game, Chrono and his friends gain access to time travel gates and various other forms of time travel. Far from being a gimmick though, the passage of time is inherently critical to many of the game's plotlines and side quests. You'll be introduced to an extremely turbulent past where monstrous fiends are trying to wipe out humanity, and to a post-apocalyptic future where the game's main antagonist Lavos, an extraterrestrial parasite that crash-landed to the planet in ancient history and has been draining the life of the planet ever since, but we'll get back to that later. Now able to control the passage of time, Chrono and his friends can rewrite history and correct the ancient tragedies of the past, but have to be careful not to interrupt things too much, or one of your party members could cease to exist. You also gain the novel ability to jump right to the end of the game at almost any point to try and fight the final boss as early as you like, which will unlock one of the game's 13 in total endings. This butterfly effect runs throughout the game, and many side quests can be done at different stages of progression, altering how they go, or be missed entirely. NPCs react differently to you depending on where you are in the timeline. If you open certain treasure chests in the past and find it again in the future timeline, it will be empty because you've already opened it, but if you open it in the present, then travel back in time, you can open it again. There's a sort of mind-boggling consistency here that makes the passage of time during the game feel very believable. The fact that they wove the time travel narrative into the actual player mechanics is really groundbreaking for the time, kind of like if you took Mario's warp zone areas to the next extreme. Also solidifying this is that each location in the game appears completely differently, yet familiar, depending on the era of time that you're currently visiting. As an example, there's a bell that rings during the opening of the game, and you can stumble upon this bell being constructed in the past. You can plant a tree in a desert, then return eons later to find a forest has grown, and there are many more examples of this. The 16-bit Super Nintendo graphics are quite possibly the best on the system. Releasing just over a year before the next-gen Nintendo 64 and Sony PlayStation, developers were extremely comfortable on the Super Nintendo hardware, and that's very evident here. Everything runs smoothly, environments are presented in just about the most cinematic way possible for the era, and Akira Toriyama's conceptual character designs have been brilliantly realised in the sprite art. Not to mention the fully realised anime cutscenes the game sometimes treats you with at certain pivotal points in the plot. Pair that with the amazing soundtrack by Yasunori Mitsuda and legendary Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu, and the presentation of this game is extremely hard to rival. The cast of Chrono Trigger is a huge highlight also. There are no weak links here. Everyone has a distinctive personality and a fleshed out backstory by the end of the game. Nobody is annoying or rendered useless in combat. It's really a cast to rival any RPG game. If I had to criticise one thing in Chrono Trigger, it's that at times it can be a little bit cryptic in terms of letting you know what you need to do next. Given that you can visit the same locations in different time periods, and something is often mentioned only once in a text box, it's easy to find yourself lost and not knowing where or when to go. This is most problematic during the end game's final optional side quests, where I finally caved and looked up a guide a few times, and I'm glad I did, as it allowed me to get the best and canon ending, but no game should force you to use a guide to do that. One or two areas in the game were a bit more difficult to navigate, as with top-down 2D environments it can be hard to differentiate depth, but this was usually done in areas that were actually supposed to be difficult to navigate, like a maze, rather than any sort of bad design choice. Remember when I mentioned the extraterrestrial antagonist? An extraterrestrial parasite that crash landed to the planet in ancient history. See, I did say that. As an enormous fan of Final Fantasy VII, I just wanted to note the development overlap between this game and that. Several of the staff were working on both games at the same time, with teams sharing ideas and concepts, and it shows throughout in the final design. There are huge parallels between Lavos and Genova. Both crash landed in ancient times, wanting to use the planet as a resource before moving on to its next victim. Combat in both games use an active time combat system. Enemies fade to red when they die, and there are more than a few other Easter eggs and commonalities in there. One final honourable mention before giving my rating for the game is that the developer made time to implement the Super Nintendo's Mode 7 graphics mode and push the system right to its limit, notably during a racing sequence similar to F-Zero, creating the illusion of 3D space. Overall, Chrono Trigger delivers on every front and absolutely stands the test of time. With a narrative to rival any Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, a battle system that's entirely unique, and some now iconic scenes, it helped pave the way for many other games that were taking note in 1995. I rate Chrono Trigger 10 cones out of 10. This is RPG perfection, and if for any reason you still haven't played it like I hadn't, do yourself a favour and open up a gate to 1995 and play one of the greatest games ever made. A classic masterpiece that modern games could still stand to borrow from and everyone should own. The game is currently available on Steam. Do yourself a favour. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the timeline. Why not take a gate to one of my other retrospective reviews of classic games, or something a bit more modern? Leave a comment if you love Chrono Trigger as much as I did, like and subscribe for more in the future, and stay safe.